Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, Tallulah's here. It is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your Archbishop of Banterbury, your Chancellor of Cheerfulness, and as always, your existential Mr. Rogers. And listen to Tallulah. You know, I thought it'd be a good idea to let him in, but let them both in. But apparently, is it a good idea? Let's see. Let's see if it's a good idea. Is it a good idea? I don't know, Tallulah. Are you going to be quiet? Let's see. I mean, I got to change the camera angle if she's going to be here. Okay, you crazy dog. All right. You want to join the party? Is that what you're here to do? Yes, you can. It's been a while. People ask about you guys, and I'll decide to let you on. How about that? Well, Gilbert's got to get one. No, you don't eat Gilbert's treat. No. You can't eat Gilbert's treat. That's not good. It's not good, Tallulah. How's it good to see you? Huh? Look at her new haircut. Look at that. Look at those ears. Is this one cute dog? Okay, I have to start the show now. All right, you're treated up. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Robservations episode 420. And I am Rob casting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I do have the dogs in the house this episode. So I guess Gilbert didn't get to come up. So come here, Gilbert. You want to come up? Come here. Oh, look at that. There you go, buddy. There you go. Everybody's got to see how you guys look so good with your haircuts, huh? We couldn't get you guys haircuts in like months. But now they're both here. Yeah. You guys don't get to appear on the show enough, do you? No. And you, pretty girl. Guys, girls, I got to start this show. I can't hang out and play with you. That's not what this show's about, as much as I would like to. Well, okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 420. But I'm going to go into this show completely, no one's smoking out here. No dank nugs today. Except this one. She's kind of a dank nug. Oh, is that what you want to do? Yeah. Yeah. This is why I don't let her on the show. She barks quite a bit, ladies and gentlemen. Well, listen, a couple of things I thought were interesting to share. One of them is my favorite subject, QUIBI. Yes, an analyst wrote an article about QUIBI that I want to share with you. Because, man, how exciting is that? Let me tell you. But before that, I wanted to talk about an article I found, an interview with director James Mangold. Obviously, he directed Logan and The Wolverine. He also directed recently Ford v. Ferrari, which one of my favorite movies of last year and won a few Academy Awards. But he was weighing in on the future of movie theaters after the COVID-19 epidemic and where we are going to be. Hey, you guys got to be quiet. They just want more treats. That's all they want. That's all I'm good for. All right, you're going to get one more tweet. You know, whenever I give you treats, it just makes it look like I'm a chump. That you have me trained instead of me having you trained. And this is one of the reasons. Okay, Gilbert, do you want to come up? There you go. I mean, we might as well make it cinematic, right? If they're going to be here, I want to see some cinematic... All right. I know. Give me a kiss, baby. Come on. After all of our talk of xenomorph love, what are people going to say? Huh? And you, pretty girl, you need to get down and be quiet. Do you want to stay here? You can stay here. Anyway, so I'm going to jump into this this James Mangold article because I thought it was absolutely worth sharing. Now, I can't deny that Tallulah will probably chime in. But I found this. This was discussingfilms.net, someplace I don't normally go to, and this was printed on my birthday on May 15th. And it doesn't say who did the interview right away, but it says that we were fortunate enough to have Mangold for an exclusive interview, not like the traditional sit-down, considering we're all in the middle of quarantine. We talked the state of the film industry and where it's going. He also goes in-depth in how he tackles based on a real event storytelling, as he did with last year's Oscar-winning Ford v. Ferrari. The mighty Mangold holds nothing back. Now, I'm not going to read this entire interview, but I thought what he had to say about movie exhibition is something that literally I have been talking about since I started going to movies when I was a little kid and became aware of presentation, the presentation in cinema. And to me, as it was in the 50s, when the Academy ratio gave way to wide gauge filmmaking. I mean, we had everything from VistaVision to CinemaScope in a bid to protect moviegoing from the threat of television. And just like it was back in the 50s, we are right there as with streaming. People have projectors, they've got bigger televisions. We really need to, in my mind, to make sure that the cinema-going experience is optimized. Now, I'm lucky to live in Los Angeles, where a lot of our theaters, there's an arms race to provide the best theatrical movie-going experience. And that's why you see AMC investing into their Dolby cinemas. They partnered up with Dolby. And when you go in there, you've got the posh seats, the reclining seats. You can adjust them however you want. And the experience, the presentation, the laser projection, and the Dolby Vision and the sound, Dolby Atmos, senses shattering sound, is why you go see films at those cinemas. And I think it's an important thing to mention. And so this article begins. So to start off with, how are you doing in lockdown? James Mangold says, I'm writing. It's a time for thinking about your movies because you can't be making them. So it's a time for taking care of remaining script notes on existing projects, exploring some new ideas, checking in with your collaborators about things, all of whom are kind of in their own spaces. In some ways, it's a creative time. In others, of course, a scary time because we don't know what film production is going to look like exactly on the other side of all this. Discussing Film says, as you mentioned, film production, and given the current pandemic and the rise of video on demand and streaming, we were wondering what your thoughts are on films being made and released almost exclusively for streaming. Mangold goes on and says, that's already happening, isn't it? That's been happening for almost a decade now. In terms of Netflix, I mean, there's plenty of movies that are really destined for streaming from the moment they're born, whether they appear briefly in a theater or not. Most of us film creators, as opposed to the film business people, I think, at this point, I've been making movies since the mid-90s, I've weathered many changes. Everyone predicts a wholesale change, and this is dying, and this will be the end of theatrical, or this will be the end of home video, or this will be the end of whatever. And in some ways, the predictions are usually right, although the results happen slower than the doomsday scenarios. But also things surprise you. Like, streaming didn't even exist until 20 years ago. The imagination of streaming didn't exist. The ability to now deliver at least an approximation of a 4K image to a home at the press of a button with no physical material being exchanged is a new thing. There were also many trends happening in the movie business before coronavirus, meaning that independent films were struggling. Smaller films are struggling to find an audience. People have, by and large, gotten more used to staying at home. So the theatrical experience has, in the main, become a place to see event movies. And perhaps for one or two smaller films that are somehow either so provocative or grab the social zeitgeist so firmly that people feel the need to ingest them, consume them, before they get to them on another pipeline. To me, filmmaking is filmmaking. What we've always considered the delivery of a movie to a smaller screen is sometimes now not necessarily that much of a smaller screen. The reality of theater projection has gotten so tragically bad in most cases. The fight to put on your movie in a theater that stinks and someone's eating an enchilada next to you, half the screen is out of focus or too dim. Theatrical has its own problems, which is that if it doesn't make itself a sterling presentation that you cannot approximate in the home, then theatrical kills itself without any other delivery method even competing with it. When I talk to theater owners or theater chains, that's the big thing. You know, I had an experience just on Ford v. Ferrari, where I went to a landmark theater in New York for kind of an Academy question and answer. Major theater in central Manhattan. major screens fighting for prestige screenings. They had left there, one of the things that'll happen is there are different lenses for 3D films and standard films. The 3D lenses split up prisms that split the light and cut the light level in half, basically. Lazy theater owners will just keep the 3D lenses in all the time, which color the movies blue and make them dim on the screen, even when it's a non-3D film. It's just strictly either financial or physical laziness to send someone up and put a different lens in the projection system. I discovered both screenings were happening through 3D lenses with a non-3D movie. This, again, is at a studio-booked landmark screening at a fancy major-owned theater in New York. My point really is just that theatrical is a wasteland right now of a lot of shitty delivery of movies to audiences who are paying a premium to see them on a big screen. That's something that needs to be solved in the future. I don't think theatrical is dead. I'm sure there's going to be casualties from this in all the theater chains, but I think that people wanting to go out and have a special experience on a big, big screen with great presentation of a movie that isn't available anywhere else is something that will continue. But I do think the kind of glory period that came up during the 90s, when there was really thriving independent cinema on screens in major cities, is already gone. It was gone before this virus arrived. In many ways, you could see streaming as the chicken or the egg, either the killer or the savior. More interesting voices in movies. And then they ask, Discussing Film says, do you think then that filmmakers should have more sane involvement within theaters and the theatrical process? Well, of course, but do I believe they do? No, because the theaters are like capitalist endeavors in a never-ending cycle of running from bankruptcy. They pay people as little as they can. They hire as few people as they can. They serve snacks that cost them 45 cents to manufacture at prices 22 times the cost of creating. They put you in a theater that is as passable as it can be at the minimum amount of expense. Once in a while, the theater chain will renovate and put new equipment in, but the people running the equipment aren't great, trained, or even give a shit because they're not paid enough. Then the result is always going to be questionable. It's just that simple. It really doesn't matter what filmmakers say when theater owners are worried about whether they can pay rent next month, more than whether some spoiled filmmaker thinks their sound is too low or the image brightness isn't high enough. That's not where their heads are. I thought that was really important because that's exactly what I have been saying for the longest time. Let me just put this down. And there is the letter, the whole interview. It's a great interview, and I suggest everybody read it. Gilbert and Tallulah are actually playing on my rug here in the Robservatory. There's a space for them to frolic because it's raining outside here in Los Angeles, and they can't play outside, so they've come here. And if there's a little bit of barking, I hope you will bear with me. Some of you have been bummed out that they haven't been here, so I figured, I'll let them in. Now, once again, there's a lot of people that have come after me for my what they call my hard-on for QUIBI. Now, here's the thing. I don't bear QUIBI any ill will. And for those of you who don't know, Emil Johansson, did I say? Sorry, Emil. Here's the thing. QUIBI is a new streaming service that was started by Meg Whitman from eBay and Jeffrey Katzenberg, formerly of DreamWorks, SKG. He was a Paramount executive and ran Disney. Jeffrey Katzenberg, very smart, very savvy executive. But QUIBI is a platform that was based on the idea that they wanted to create bite-sized programming. And in their minds, bite-size was 4 to 10 minutes, or what they christened a QUIBI. That QUIBI is a moment of time that apparently they were hoping to make it catch on, like Fetch, like I've said. It ain't gonna catch on. Why are you barking at me, Tallulah? They're still fighting over there. And I'm like, And Quibi was launched, and it's only available on cell phones. That was all they wanted. I prefer cell phones when they're called the Black Mirror. That's where they came up with that title, all the screens that are around us. But this idea that Quibi, they wanted to get A-list celebrities and A-list stars. You need to stop. You gotta stop. You gotta stop barking and growling. Sit. Good girl. Good for you. You stay quiet. So I have been fascinated watching this happen because I just thought it was so wrong-headed. This kind of thinking seems so 10 years ago. And I know that one of the things that I had heard about YouTube before I was even on YouTube, before I was even on Collider Heroes 5 years ago, is the conventional wisdom was that YouTube, people who are putting YouTube out, and this is like now we have Vine. Vine has been supplanted by TikTok. Vine went away and now there's TikTok. But there was this idea that nobody would watch content on YouTube that was more than 3 minutes long. That was the conventional wisdom. Well, clearly shows like this and the John Campea Show, the Movie Trivia Schmodown, Collider Heroes, AMC Heroes, especially things like Joe Rogan and the programs of the intellectual dark web, Dave Rubin, anybody that's having long-form discussion shows have proven that wrong. And yet, Quibi was still adapting this thing that their whole idea was people want to watch A-list content with A-list creators while on the go. And I would have thought that it would have been obvious that if you're on the go, you need content that's probably shorter than that. Movie trailers, maybe, quick snippets of this or that. Because when you're on the go, you're never entirely paying attention unless you're on a long commute or something on a train. You're never on any kind of a long... You have to stop, Tallulah. You have to stop or I'm going to make you leave. I'm going to kick you all out. It was an experiment to see if you guys could hang out here without barking. Here, why don't you go and play with Gilbert? Play with Gilbert. Go over there. He wants to play with you. Go ahead. Anyway, so I've just followed this whole thing from the very beginning, very curious as to whether it would work or not. Quibi, and it has not. She's very loquacious today. It has not worked. So, why are you doing this? Why are you making me look bad live on the air? You only talk when I talk. All right, you want me to give you one more treat? That's all I'm going to give you. You have to be quiet. I look like such a chump. You're making me look like a chump on live worldwide on the internet. Vesna's sitting there in Sarajevo going, don't you discipline your dogs? Everybody asks that, but we do. But you know what? I mean, I can't help it. They get excited to be in here, and Tallulah is an attention whore. That's what she wants. That's all she wants, is to have her tummy rubbed all day, every day. And she does not leave me alone. That's no excuse. I'm just saying. That's the reality of her. So anyway, the whole thing with Quibi, I was fascinated watching it develop. I'd heard a lot about it over the years. Would it work? And I was convinced it would not work. And as an industry watcher, I mean, to me, it's like, hey, another platform. Maybe there's something to be done there. Maybe there's a show you can go pitch there. Well, there was a really interesting article published on Loop Ventures, which is an investment company's website. And it's written by a guy named Doug Clinton. I can't tell you if that's any relation to Bill Clinton. I don't know. I don't think so. But this was published 3 days ago, and I recently caught up with it, along with James Mangold's interview. Why Quibi is losing the attention game. Quibi is off to a rough start, and it's the fault of the coronavirus, or so says the company. To date, as we know, I read an article with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He blamed the entire, let's say, well, there's no other word to call it, epic failure of Quibi out of the gate. To date, the coronavirus. To date, Quibi has only 3.5 million downloads and 1.3 million active users a little over a month after launch. But the problem isn't coronavirus. It's how the company is playing the attention game. The attention game is more crowded than ever by big companies like Netflix, Disney+, HBO, YouTube, Fortnite, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, etc. Even though each offer, I would put TikTok in there as well. Even though each offer vastly different products, they all compete for our finite leisure attention. as does QUIBI. We see two ways to win the attention game: fill consumer time that isn't being filled, and two, make your content more compelling than everyone else's. And the cardinal rule: once you have the consumer's attention, you keep it. Fill unfilled time. In fairness to QUIBI's management team, the reason they believe coronavirus is to blame for a slow start is that it eliminated many in-between moments, which the company built its strategy around. An in-between moment would be standing in line, commuting, walking to the office, etc. It would appear that QUIBI thought it would fill some unfulfilled time with 7-minute TV shows. However, I'd argue the problem isn't that those moments have disappeared, it's that they were already spoken for. People may not be able to watch Netflix during an in-between moment, but they can watch Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, etc. A 7-minute in-between moment is just a string of 7-second views of content on social media for many people, and given how much short content is available, particularly social video content, that time is well served. No comment on whether that time is well spent. If we step back in history briefly, attempting to fill unfulfilled time has been a good strategy when time is truly unfulfilled. The emergence of iPhone and Android let us fill in the many bits of downtime in our day, like waiting in line, when we used to have to rely on books or newspapers or just doing nothing. I believe one of the biggest underappreciated reasons for Facebook's success over the past decade is that it coincided with the proliferation of the smartphone. The smartphone let us fill those in-between moments with bits of social media and, as we got addicted to social media, many moments beyond the in-between. Social media was the original QUIBI. We've previously estimated that we spend about 70% of our waking hours engaged somehow with information. Many of us might be engaged closer to 100% of the time with podcasts, audiobooks, and music, filling time when we can't look at a screen. There's very little unfulfilled time now for attention game participants to fill, so they have to rely on making their content more compelling than everyone else's. Compelling content. Given the demands on our time, we pay attention to new things that elicit some emotion. Things that bore us elicit no emotion, and we ignore those things. Things that excite us elicit emotion, and we often share those things. Modern content creates an emotional response in 3 ways. Richness, which is a measure of information density. Video games like Fortnite are richer through their interactivity. Emojis are richer than text. AR lenses are richer than just videos on Snapchat. Epic shows like Game of Thrones or Westworld create richness through vast worlds and depth of story. Extremity, which is a measure of information intensity. Politics, social media content, new media all use extremity to generate emotion, which generates attention. Relevance, which is a measure of information intimacy. Social media is compelling because it often involves people we know, or it involves influencers who we feel like we know, even if we've never met them. Content with a built-in fan base is also naturally relevant, Star Wars, Marvel, etc. As a rule, the bar for what is compelling is always increasing. Thus, the demand for rich, extreme, and/or relevant content is always increasing. QUIBIs may be mildly richer in terms of how they tell stories through smaller components, but it isn't that much different than chopping up a movie into pieces. QUIBI hasn't really attempted extremity or relevance. While Hollywood stars carry cachet with broad audiences, few have the kind of relationships with fans that influencers have with smaller audiences. QUIBI's content isn't bad, it's perfectly fine. It's just hard to get the attention of a new audience without very compelling content. Platforms like Netflix can get away with fine, at least for a little while, because they already have attention mindshare. To take attention mindshare, content needs to be compelling. And when you do get that attention, you have to keep it. When you have them, keep them. QUIBI's final mistake is that even when they do get a share of someone's attention, they release episodes daily instead of all at once. When an attention game player gets someone's attention, they should keep it as long as possible to create an attachment between the user and the platform. An advantage Netflix that exploits over traditional TV is that it releases episodes of original content all at once, and users can binge. When users binge, they build trust in Netflix and come back for some other content to binge again. Episodic releases discourage binging, and platforms that use those type of releases have to hope that users are sufficiently interested in to remember to come back and watch again the next day or week. That model may have worked for traditional TV, but it's much tougher when that attention time is under constant pressure from every other platform listed above. Keeping attention means you have to have a rich base of content. Social media platforms get users to create this for them. Streaming platforms need to build a big and broad enough library on their own where, again, Netflix has a large advantage. We can question the ethics of the necessity of attention hoarding that every attention platform must do, but this post is about winning the attention game, not about whether the game is morally good or not. Again, I thought that was a great take on QUIBI, and it's something that I have been just fascinated by, and I'm loving reading other people's takes about QUIBI. And I have been, as someone who I look over social media, the resounding silence by which social media has met all of QUIBI's programming is probably the most damning thing of all. Is anyone talking about QUIBI shows? And I think, that's something to be said for, I think, a complete disconnect from the executive level, at the corporate level, to a consumer and a creator level. Of course, people would come in and pitch ideas to QUIBI. If you've got money and someone's going to pay you to create content that you can own a piece of, you're going to take that content, you're going to own it. It doesn't matter if you've already been paid, you've done your job, you did the job, you deliver the content. Then it's up to QUIBI to sell the content. And while they did go after certain YouTube influencers and influencers from other places, those influencers already have their platforms. As we have discovered, I could tell you a lot. The more I think about my experience, I was never involved with the machinations of running a channel like Collider. I wasn't a part of those decisions. I was just talent that walked in and basically talked. But I could tell you that we brought in influencers at Collider, people that I like very much, who are very successful on their own channels, but their success on their own channels didn't translate over to Collider. Because like this article points out, people have relationships. Like if suddenly this show, if Robservations went over to a different platform, I don't know if everybody would follow me. You guys might. I'm not saying you're bad fans or bad supporters or that the Post-Geek Singularity wouldn't come, but there's an expectation you guys have that I'm going to be on YouTube every day. The YouTube platform, it doesn't cost anything. If you choose to support the channel through financial means, that's great. I love that, but you can choose to do it or not. But if I was moved over to a platform that you had to pay for, how many people would do that? I don't know. And it's a choice. It's something that I could even say that over the 420 episodes of this show that I've done, I have relationships with each and every one of you, and to a certain extent, some of you have become regular letter writers. Some of you interact with me on Twitter. Some people interact with me on Facebook. But we've built a community here, and the community is just as big a part of this channel as I am. So I believe that there's even a possibility that if I went away, maybe somebody else. What if I had to leave for 6 months? Could Trevor Noah come on and take over and run the Post-Geek Singularity, or at least do shows? I don't know. But I think at least people here might give them a shot, whether it was a man or a woman or perhaps a xenomorph herself. I don't know. But I think that there would be a certain, I don't know, there's a community here that's been built. And I think there's also one thing our article didn't talk about, was there is a community around Netflix as well. When your friends have Netflix, you can call up and talk about the shows that you've binged. And I don't think you can just launch and expect a community to just be there. You have to develop a community based on your content. And by the way, I've seen that's been true for the last 30 years. I've talked about when Image Comics was formed and the main creators from Image went over and started Image, and it was wildly successful because people followed the creators. Other people tried to jump in and create comics. It wasn't the medium that was successful. It's the creators themselves. It's the people. Why do you listen to your favorite morning drive time shock jock or DJ or talk show host? You like them. You know, they're the talent. If you want to call them talent, or they're the personality, or you want, I mean, they're the people you want to listen to. I know in my mind, or in my world, I like tuning into other people. The YouTube people that I watch, I like them. I like what they bring. I like watching their shows. I like their takes. You know, whether it's people like Dave Cullen or Davey504 or, you know, Gem Mint. I like Gem Mint's channel. Basically what Gem Mint does is he talks about comic omnibuses. As you can see, I'm a big fan of omnibuses. And he also talks about statues that I don't even collect. But I like to see the statues, and I like to see what's going on. So I never miss one of Gem Mint's videos. I like Davey504, the bass player from Italy. I don't play the bass. I don't know anything about playing bass, but I like watching his channel. I like watching him. You know, and I think that's something that needs to be remembered. And I think what's so interesting about QUIBI is they tried to jump into multiple areas. Streaming. They wanted to bring in influencers. They wanted to do all of these things, but they had none of the groundwork that was done. And it's been very interesting to watch. I take no pleasure in watching them not succeed, but I just find it amazing that a corporation that or a group of people that worked in corporate America can go raise $1.5 billion in financing, which is something I can't do. Personally, if I wanted to go raise money, I don't have the credibility to do that. I can't even raise $2 million to make movies. It's hard out there. But they raised almost $2 billion. And it's not working. And the funny thing is I think a lot of people could have told them that it wasn't going to work. Maybe they'll pull it out. Maybe they'll make it work. But I just don't know. And I'm fascinated to watch where it goes. And maybe that's just me. But I am fascinated. So and I can't get over it. Ladies and gentlemen, now that you've listened to another QUIBI rant, I have a reward for you. A delicious reward, like a candy bar filled with chocolatey, nougaty, caramely, nutty goodness. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I have a letter from Willow Yang. And it's a good letter. It's a good letter, as all of them are, but this one's particularly good. You're going to love this. Greetings, Rob. A forewarning. This letter is going to be filled with hot takes, and I think that I might lose quite a bit of respect after this. Here goes. I'm one of those people who grew up with the Star Wars prequels, and if given a choice, would actually watch them over the original trilogy. And while I do think that The Empire Strikes Back is probably the best made movie of the franchise, I actually like Return of the Jedi the most out of the originals. If you have the patience to indulge me and not discard my letter by now, I would like to elaborate further. Come on, Willow, I would never discard anything that you've written. The prequels were the first Star Wars that I ever watched, and I enjoyed them as a child. Back then, I didn't really understand much about dialogue. To be honest, I was still struggling with understanding English in general, and thus I didn't have any problems with lines like, "I hate sand." The visual effects definitely look dated now, but they were beautiful and state-of-the-art at the time. I just loved all the spectacle. While it is much more prevalent nowadays, the sequels were one of the few Western movies I've watched at the time to feature the stylized sword fighting and stunts that I was used to seeing in wuxia films and anime. And I just ate it up. I loved the fight with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn against Darth Maul. I loved the confrontation between Yoda and Count Dooku. I had no perception of what the Force is and how it's supposed to work, so I took no issue with it being explained by midi-chlorians. Even though I now realize that neither Jake Lloyd nor Hayden Christensen gave particularly good performances, I liked seeing the evolution of the character from an innocent child to a hot-headed young man to one of the most feared villains in the galaxy. I know that dark and gritty dystopian stories may be a dime a dozen nowadays, but seeing a trilogy that ended with the triumph of the villain was completely new to me as a kid, who was used to seeing predictable fairy tale endings where the heroes inevitably vanquish the bad guys. Order 66 was quite an emotional punch for me. I still get chills when John Williams' haunting score comes on during that scene. I just couldn't get into the original trilogy. I know that it's probably sacrilegious to say, but the first time I watched the movies, the re-release versions, of course, in the early 2000s, I honestly found them to be rather cheesy and outdated. I had no knowledge of the historical context, just how revolutionary the technology of the original Star Wars was when it first came out. I've already, unfortunately, been spoiled by the visual effects extravaganza of Lord of the Rings. I found the lightsaber duels to be lame. I couldn't really connect with any of the characters, and I already knew everything that was going to happen in the stories, so there were no surprises for me. About the only thing that I liked was the score, specifically the Imperial March, which remains as one of my favorite themes of all time. Of the originals, Return of the Jedi was my favorite movie. It's a little strange considering how much I loathe the Ewoks, who had absolutely no verisimilitude to me. In spite of my disdain toward those miserable fuzzy things, however, Return of the Jedi did contain some of my favorite moments throughout the Star Wars franchise. I love the scene in the Emperor's throne room with Luke first showing mercy to his father and Vader, in turn, sacrificing himself for his son. I love the idea of a villain still possessing humanity. Vader may be an evil mass killer, but he's still not exempted from feelings, and he still loved his son. As was with Anakin's turn in the prequels, the boundary between good and evil, heroism and villainy was torn down in that scene. That was new to me at the time, and it left an impact. The ending with the Force Ghosts also managed to touch me. As I've mentioned earlier, I've only seen the re-released version, which had Hayden Christensen instead of Sebastian Shaw as Anakin's Force Ghost. I had no idea at the time about all the different Star Wars editions, however, and I know that this is silly, but I actually didn't even realize it was Hayden Christensen in the movie. I just assumed that the original trilogy had an actor that looked like him. And I'll tell you what, that change worked for me. I had just seen Anakin being a disfigured, dying old man, and seeing him now young and whole again, well, I just found that to be poetic. I actually teared up a bit the first time I saw the scene. Does a single good deed make up for a lifetime of murder? No. Does the appearance of a young Anakin's Force Ghost make much sense? Probably not. But I suppose that love isn't supposed to make sense. I've tried rewatching the original trilogy a few times now. I've grown to appreciate them, knowing more of the context under which that they had come out. I admire them for their technical achievements, as well as their storytelling and world building. However, even though I acknowledge that the original trilogy are probably better films, I just cannot force myself to love them any more than I can force myself to dislike the prequels in spite of their overabundance of flaws. Maybe one day, when I have enough courage, I'll write a letter on why I've liked the modern Star Trek movies. I just hope we can still be friends. Best regards, Willow. First of all, Willow, bravo on another fantastic letter. But, you know, to me, Willow's letter is a perfect, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't think many other people could have said it better themselves or illustrated the idea of the totality of fandom and something that we all need to remember. Now, I've said this a lot about the James Bond franchise. People seem to be a little bit more forgiving about James Bond. That the James Bond franchise remains in your heart the way it was the first time that you saw it. Usually most people's favorite Bonds are the first Bond they ever saw. In my case, the first Bond I ever saw was Sean Connery because when I was a kid, I was much closer to the original release dates of the films. And with these venerable franchises that go decade after decade after decade, we have generations of people growing up and experiencing these things for the first time. Now, when you first saw Star Wars, you saw the prequel trilogy. So your entire worldview, your entire understanding of what Star Wars is, was, of course, defined by the first time you experienced Star Wars, which is absolutely the way it should be. And for anybody to try and tell you to come along and say, well, Willow, you know, the prequel trilogy, it sucks. It's a bunch of garbage. Isn't right. Those people are also wrong because those people haven't experienced Star Wars the way you did. Excuse me. And so I understand when I was growing up, when I first saw Star Wars, the original Star Wars in the theater, its opening weekend, it was a mind-blowing game changer that at the time, there was nothing remotely similar to Star Wars that had ever existed. And for what I call, I mean, I've always said that the original Star Wars is the demarcation point for OGs, original media geeks like myself. It was a game changer that not only was a game changer in terms of what was possible with science fiction and fantasy filmmaking, but it gave way to almost a decade's worth of cinema that changed the perception of what science fiction, fantasy, and horror could be on screen. It seemed like every movie that came out, every major genre release from a studio was a different game changer. After Star Wars, there was Superman the movie. Then in 79, there was Alien. Then The Empire Strikes Back. And within that small 3-year period of time, there was all kinds of other movies coming out. There was all the Star Wars ripoffs, Japanese Message from Space, the Italian Star Crash. And I liked all those movies. They weren't that great, but I still liked them. And then the horror genre was changed, the slasher genre, Halloween, then horror films like Phantasm or Dawn of the Dead, Phantasm bringing a healthy dose of science fiction and fantasy into the realm of horror. And all of these movies were pushing the envelope in various ways. And everything was being changed. And for me, as a young kid, I was being exposed to this stuff. It was mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And then after Empire, we got things like Superman 2, and then by 85, all bets were off. Jedi. I mean, you get to Back to the Future, then you get to movies like Reanimator, which was still pushing the envelope. Friday the 13th came out in 1980. Nightmare on Elm Street came out in 84. I mean, the slasher genre was being pushed further and further into the fantasy realm. I mean, this was a fantastic time. But I've always said on the show, if you grow up in a world where Jurassic Park exists, it's very difficult to go back and to watch a Ray Harryhausen film or to go watch a movie that comes from, well, any stop motion film, Valley the Gwangi, whatever. Once you've seen photorealistic CG dinosaurs like we see in Jurassic Park, it's hard to go back. It's hard for anybody, any audience member who began there to go back and find value in what came before. As much as I want to say historical context is everything. Look, if you've grown up with the Star Wars prequels and that was your first experience, they were state-of-the-art. Remember, The Phantom Menace is still the movie that has the most miniatures ever built for it. People think it's all CG. It was not. And there was amazing, groundbreaking effects in those films. So there's no reason. I mean, remember, Phantom Menace came out in 1999. Star Wars came out 22 years before that. 3 years shy of a quarter century. And with the way technology is increased by leaps and bounds, you don't have to apologize for what you like and what you don't like. If those stories work for you and you explain very clearly, succinctly, and easy to understand concepts, why they meant something to you, especially coming as you were immigrating from China and learning how to speak English and figuring out what it all meant and that it had more ties to the Chinese movies you'd grown up with. So your experience is absolutely valid. And this is something that I think we in fandom, we don't recognize enough, is that everybody's fandom began somewhere. And what's happening now is, look, I am an OG middle-aged fan with one foot in his grave. My experience of Star Wars is very different than yours. But your experience of Star Wars is your experience. And I can never come along and tell you that experience is wrong. You didn't exist. You could never have had the experience that I had with Star Wars or Star Trek. Star Trek was very, very important to me growing up. I never even thought there would ever be Star Trek movies. And look where we are now. So I think that's something that everybody needs to be mindful of, is that every generation of fandom has a whole new experience of that fandom. And while we can criticize things, and I have no problem criticizing things, I think that objectively the writing has become worse. And I think the writing has become worse for a lot of reasons. But I think the real problem is that writing obviously began, storytelling, literary storytelling began in books and plays. It was the written word. And now a lot of our writers have learned how to write. The people that are writing the media that we have learned to write from other media. And what has been lacking in the quality of writing, and specifically in modern science fiction storytelling on television, is I don't think a lot of our writers today are as well read as the writers we had in the past that were writing scripts. That's just a function of evolution and time. So I try, and when I think back to, okay, I dislike a lot of the writing that's happening in modern science fiction, specifically Star Trek, well, and in Star Wars, because I think that there isn't a lot of literary underpinnings. There's not a literary foundation. All science fiction, fantasy, and horror, all genre writing is best when it has a literary foundation. When the people that are writing it have a working knowledge of where the genre came from, so they understand the tropes. They understand how those tropes work. And I'm telling you, modern science fiction has taken the genre a long way. And there's a lot of amazing science fiction that's being written now. And I think that, that's the real problem with a lot of the writing. People are writing movies because they've watched a lot of movies. I would like people writing movies that have not only watched a lot of movies, but have read a lot of books. And I think when that happens, we get better writing. But I agree with what you're saying, and I might be the curmudgeonly man that is standing on his lawn bitching about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies. But the thing is, if they worked for you and you got something out of them, don't let me tell you that you shouldn't have. You did. You got something out of those movies. You clearly enjoy them. And I will never tell you that you are wrong for liking those movies. At least not without my tongue firmly in cheek. Because if you got something out of them, you got something out of them. You can't have somebody come along and tell you, no, you didn't. No, you did. And look, if those movies lead you on a path to somewhere else, which is what, look, if you see Star Trek and you know that there's 50 years of Star Trek to go back and look at, you'll go back and look at it, and you're all the richer for it. And I believe that intelligent people, that they can see beyond any of the production limitations and find value in the storytelling. But, it requires a certain level of intelligence to be able to do that. And I think that Star Trek fans, traditionally, sort of are inherently that way. So I have no problem. Anyway, I really liked your letter. I think your letter gets at the core of what I'd like to think that this community is all about. Whether it was a letter from our teenager yesterday, or I get letters from people that are older than me. This community is all about sharing the things that we love and sharing the insights into those things. And we should never take that experience away from anyone. So, speaking of that, I have another letter, and this one comes from Michael Burns. And he wrote this. His email subject heading was Growing Up Geeky. Rob, I'm going to state the Robvious. You have a great YouTube channel. Listening to you talk about your passions and your viewers' passions with so much love, honesty, and positivity each day is a real joy. I always seem to find at least one of your comments or a viewer's thoughts that hits a nerve and makes me smile. When I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, I was a geek or nerd, but I didn't know it. I also didn't know that geeks and nerds would take over the current world we live in. I grew up in the city, Philadelphia, and much like you, I watched The Twilight Zone and Star Trek and read Marvel Comics. I had only one really good friend, and we were diehard Planet of the Apes fans from 68 to 73. We saw every movie and even took the bus downtown to see all 5 in one day. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. They used to have Go Ape festivals. And how great was that? We would also record them audio only on cassette recorders, pre-VCR days, when they were on TV so we could listen to them and practice our dialogue as geeks are wont to do. In 1977, at the age of 17, I again went down to downtown Philly, and I watched a new movie called Star Wars. I loved it so much that I went back another 6 times that summer. I even kept a scrapbook of my original movie ticket stubs, newspaper clippings, and other Star Wars-related info. Sadly, that scrapbook is gone. I also used to read magazines like Starlog and Cinefantastique just to get any more behind-the-scenes info I could. When the Star Wars novel Splinter of the Mind's Eye came out, I read that too. As I grew up, I got married, I had kids, I developed my career. My geekiness lay dormant in the background, and I would get pinged every so often, though, by the new Star Wars movies and the MCU. Now, your show is doing the pinging and allowing me to get my geek back on. Thanks for all that you do. All Metal Mike. P.S. My handle is not related to rock music, but to my favorite hobby of metal detecting. I love it, which is also very geeky, and how great is that? Here comes another letter from Daniel Fielding. I enjoy your channel. Keep up the good work. Just a quick comment. Wherever I think of modern Star Trek, i.e. anything post-Nemesis 2002, all I can think of is the great Melanie song from the 60s. Look what they've done to my song, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. Well, it's the only thing I could do half right, and it's turning out all wrong, Ma. I don't know the tune of this song, so I'm just winging it. Look what they've done to my song. I remember singing that in, elementary school. I know, not a very clever or insightful email, but the song is genuinely fascinating. The tune and cadence are fairly upbeat, but is really one of the saddest songs in the folk music canon. Nothing expresses my feelings about Star Trek better. It was the only thing I could do half right. Dan Fielding. I'm going to read that again without trying to sing it. Look what they've done to my song, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. Well, it's the only thing I could do half right, and it's turning out all wrong, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. Wow, if that doesn't sum it up, I don't know what does. My God. Craziness. And let's see. I got a few people send in some tips. Calvin Bose is here. I hear you say all the time people should give films a chance. So my question is, how come you kept refusing The Sound of Music, considering who directed it and who won Best Picture? Why don't you practice what you preach? Okay, you know what? Here's the thing, Calvin. I knew that Sound of Music was a good movie. I've always known it. But I found myself, over the course of my life, resisting watching certain movies. It's sort of irrational. A lot of those were musicals and westerns, because I thought in my mind the movies would be a certain way. Maybe they would be not cool enough, too cheesy. I don't know. It was my own personal prejudice, and I'll admit, a total shortcoming. I discovered, I've told this story about how I owned Singing in the Rain on Laserdisc. I'd heard so much about it before I was in college, when I was collecting Laserdiscs, starting in my senior year of high school, actually my junior year of high school. I was going to buy all of the great classic movies on Laserdisc to have them, because I felt obligated that I didn't want, say, if I had a lovely lady coming over to my house and she was like, I was reading about cinema history and I've heard about The Sound of Music. Do you have that? Maybe we should watch that. I never wanted any woman to walk into my house and say, do you have this film? And me going, I don't. I never wanted that to ever happen. I mean, if that happened, that would be like the ultimate in failure. So I would buy these movies, but I didn't watch them. And I didn't watch it because I thought, how good can Singing in the Rain be? Am I going to like this movie? And it was the first day I was at USC. I was sitting in the Norris Cinema 190. I had to take it. And they showed Singing in the Rain. It was a print, a glorious film print, projected in the 500-seat Norris Theater. And I was captivated. I loved it. Loved it. And as a matter of fact, that first semester at USC, I saw a lot of movies that I had never seen before. That some of them I owned, some of them I didn't. All About Eve, which is now one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the best screenplays ever. Robert Altman's Nashville, which I had never seen. There was just movies that and seeing them on the big screen, first of all, is enchanting. That's why I think everybody should be able to see all movies. I mean, there's this movie theater sort of in South Pasadena. It's Quentin Tarantino tried to buy it once. It's this gigantic old cinema. It's it's served as a movie theater in many movies you've seen, but it's been closed for years. I'd love to buy that and show new movies on the weekends and then make it a revival house during the week. That's what I would do. That would be my dream. If I won the lottery, I'd go whatever that building costs, probably costs like $100 million or something. But I would go buy that building, fill it with state-of-the-art bitchin' projection. I would build an apartment on the top of it, on the top floor, and live there. But then that would be my dream. But seeing these movies, and every time I saw one, they were great. And I understood. I was like, there wasn't one of them. There wasn't one classic movie I ever watched and was disappointed by. And I knew that I had this ridiculous prejudice. I remember waking up, I've told the story before, like waking up at 5 in the morning, partying at my friend Sean Fanning's house back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when I first moved to LA, partying actually it was Kelly Goto's apartment. I frequently would crash over there. I woke up at like 5 in the morning after some bender and turned on The Searchers. And I'd never seen The Searchers before. And I was riveted. I was like, how would I never watch this? Because it was a Western. I was prejudicial against Westerns. And it was amazing. So, there you go, Calvin. I should have watched it. That was a shortcoming I had. One thing I've realized, all of the movies that are classic films, every one of them, top 100 AFI movies, they're all great. You'll be better people if you watch them all. You shouldn't be prejudicial against any genre. It's like being prejudicial against country music. You just haven't found the country music that you've liked yet. Or, I dare say, you probably have only heard a few songs like Achy Breaky Heart and gave up on a genre. Mistake. So, that was a shortcoming. Willow sends in a tip. Willow asks, have you watched or do you plan on watching Capone? I really like Chronicle and was interested in Trank's new movie, but the reviews haven't been glowing. Everyone's talking about how Capone wears diapers and repeatedly soils himself. Yes, it's about Capone's last year when he was losing his marbles and losing his faculties. I'm interested in it, but I don't know. I'll get around to it because I hear that Tom Hardy's performance is unhinged. But I don't know if it's something. I haven't read very many great reviews. There hasn't been anything about it that's made me intellectually interested in seeing it. I really wanted to see it because Josh Trank edited the film himself, and a lot of people have commented that the editing isn't good. So that's something I would be interested in watching from that perspective. I don't know though. It would bum me out. There's so much good stuff now. I mean, did you guys see the fun trailer, the Sheltering at Home trailer they dropped for the Umbrella Academy today? Season 2 is coming down the pike. And I love season 1. I wonder where they're gonna go. I can't wait. I love the comic as well. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, "Hi Rob, I was just wondering if you know what the set hours are for filming TV shows because I'm curious." Well, it really depends. I mean, normally a work day on a set is usually from 7 to 7:30 because a lunch is in there. So when I've worked on projects, when I was directing Femme Fatale's episodes, it was 7 to 7:30, and people would usually get to the set at 6:30 in the morning, and there was usually, we'd had breakfast for the crew, and so you get to work at 6:30, but the call time, you have a call time, and then there's different call times, like cast could come later, but the crew has to come earlier. It depends. But usually it was 7 to 7:30, 12-hour day. It's a 12-hour day. But like if you're doing what's called splits, so if you have night scenes and you have scenes in the day, you might start at say 3 in the afternoon. So that's what's a split. So if it's 3 in the afternoon, you would work from 3 in the afternoon till 3:30 in the morning, and that's a split day, and that's brutal. But those are the times that people work. Eyes on the Wire is here and sends in a tip and says, "I was curious if you have any news regarding Sandra Wollner's The Trouble with Being Born. After you brought it up on a previous show, I've been eagerly anticipating its release. That said, I haven't found any information on it or if it'll reach VOD." Okay. I have not. So for those of you who are wondering, The Trouble with Being Born is a German film that's basically, it's in a nutshell, it's about a very young, an android that is made in the shape of a young girl, and it's owned by a pedophile. And then more happens in the story, but that's what everybody was objecting to. And it was at It was at a film festival, and I'm dying to see it. And a lot of people objected to it, objected to the subject matter. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really, really curious about where it goes. I mean, obviously, that is in the zeitgeist. Artificial life, synthetic life, androids, robots, how we're going to treat them is a big part of what's going on. It's a big part of what's going on in Westworld. It's a big part of what was going on in Star Trek Picard. So I don't know. Well, you know what? Why not let's do a cursory Google search together right now. Let's see how that's going to go. With being born. Movie. Let's see what comes up. There's a Variety film review on March 1st. That's the first thing that pops up. It only has 2.5 stars on the IMDb. And it doesn't, wow, it really doesn't say anything. It's got a 4.6 out of 10 on the IMDb. I think people will object to it, probably. Gosh, doesn't say anything about it. Interesting. The Australian Film Commission has an article on it. Doesn't really say anything. So no, I guess not. I don't know where it's going to be. We'll have to find out. But that's really interesting, Eyes in the Wire. You and I both want to know. So absolutely. Kendiana Jones sends in a tip and says, "Hey Rob, I finally caught up with Star Trek Picard. I concur with everything you said. This is not Trek. The only thing you and I might have a disagreement on is which of us hates it more." I hated it, Rob. I really hated it, like in my blood. Well, Kendiana Jones, you and I certainly park our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay. And by the way, you know, it's so interesting people call me a hater. It's always about like I'm expressing my opinion. I'm a hater. I'm not a hater. I don't want to hate Star Trek. It doesn't give me any pleasure to hate Star Trek. What I find so interesting is, again, that the writing is so not Star Trek, and that it's frustrating to watch Star Trek continually try to be reinvented by turning it into 6 dozen other different current television shows. Whereas Star Trek is such a rich environment, it can be turned into what it always has been. And it could be looking and it could be thoughtful, thought-provoking, interesting science fiction. You know, I keep thinking about Devs, the Alex Garland's Devs. Devs could have been Picard. I mean, I know it's a leap to try and understand where I'm going with this, but the whole idea of it, I would love to have seen that turn into a Star Trek episode. I think that would have been really interesting. Mark Evans sends in a tip and says, "Hey Rob, on the heels of Willow's letter, in what order would you recommend watching Star Wars to someone who's never seen the series before? I still think I would recommend it in the order that they came out." I used to think that, Mark. I believe in the machete order. I think it works. I think you start with Star Wars, you go to The Empire Strikes Back, and then using a machete, you cut out The Phantom Menace. And you watch Attack of the Clones, and you watch Revenge of the Sith, and then you watch Return of the Jedi. I've tried it. It's pretty interesting. And a lot of the failings of, like, it makes Attack of the Clones a better movie, but a lot of the failings that it seems more like a flashback within the story, and it works, I think, really well. So if someone's never seen Star Wars, I would show them Star Wars, Empire, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then Jedi. Or if you want to be really ambitious, show them Star Wars, Empire, then the entirety of the Clone Wars series, and then the Clone Wars movie. I mean, then not the movie, then Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, or work Attack of the Clones in the middle of it somewhere. But that's what I would do. Yeah, but I think try it that way. Mukbang is here, sends in a super chat and says, "General support." Well, thank you, Mukbang. I appreciate it. Will you be on Campia later? Yes. Paula Bowlers wants to know, Well, I will be on Campia later at 2 o'clock. For whatever reason, his internet was out. We couldn't get on this morning. It was very weird. I was all, what I do is I call in and we're linked up, and then we set up 20 minutes beforehand, make it all work. He goes, gets a drink and powders his nose. I put product in my hair, and I go get water like this. And then we were just waiting, and then I come back, and we're doing a little chit-chat, and then suddenly gone, and I couldn't get him back. Couldn't get him back, and it was gone. So yeah. So I will be there. But thanks, Mukbang. I appreciate it. Evan Newman is here. Evan Newman sends in a tip. Ding, ding. Ding, ding. It's round 2 of Take One, Leave One, Rob. We're staying in the wasteland with last show's winner, but jumping ahead 30 years. Today's futuristic showdown is Mad Max Fury Road versus Blade Runner 2049. Oh. Which future will you save, Rob? Man, I love both of those movies. I love Mad Max Fury Road, and I love Blade Runner 2049. Man, that's harsh. That's harsh. I think I'm going to have to say, it's hard. I can't. These are terrible choices. Terrible choices. I mean, these are actually it's painful. I'm having an existential crisis having to give one of these up. I think I'm going to take Fury Road. And I say that only because I think Fury Road would have wider appeal. Like if I was stuck somewhere and only had one movie and had to show it to a bunch of people, I think Fury Road would be more easily digested by people. But that is that is a Sophie's choice, man. That is a Sophie's choice. I'm going to go with Fury Road. Just because it's so damn entertaining. Factual Opinion is here and says, I'm sorry, Rob, but I do not like musical movies unless it's from the South Park creators. Okay, I would ask you, I understand, but have you watched many? I mean, I would go back and I would say Umbrellas of Cherbourg, West Side Story, start there, All That Jazz, Cabaret. But I understand a lot of people don't like musical movies. I can see that. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, the length of a workday on set may be 12 hours for most of the cast and crew, but the actors with extensive makeup, like Armin Shimmerman and Renee Auberjonois in DS9, had much longer days. They did, but they still, because of SAG rules, they still had to be shot out. I don't necessarily know. I mean, they might have shot longer days, but they get paid for that. They get compensated. If it takes you 3 hours to do makeup and they want you for 12 hours, you get overtime. Because when you go to set and have makeup put on, that's part of your work day. That's part of your work day. Mark Evans said, Rob, Vesna made the observation that you never cough when drinking wine. So, well, would you like me to drink wine? No, it's just because I was coughing, I was vacuuming and dusting and stuff like that. So, but that could be you could have me there. Let's see. I've got letters. I got some letters. Omar94. Omar writes in and says, "Hi Rob, I have some more recommendations to you, your moderators, and the viewers for movies I really like and are underappreciated. So here goes. My first recommendation is an Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1956 called A Man Who Knew Too Much, with James Stewart and Doris Day. It is a remake of Hitchcock's own movie from 1934 and has the famous song Que Sera, Sera by Doris Day herself. My second recommendation is a 1944 film called Cobra Woman, starring Sabu from the 1940 Thief of Baghdad. It's a bit campy, but it's really fun. I've never seen Cobra Woman. My third recommendation is the 1959 romantic comedy called Pillow Talk with Doris Day and Rock Hudson. Pillow Talk's great. The movie has 3 songs which Day sings herself that are really good, but the movie's not a musical. My fourth is another Doris Day and Rock Hudson romantic comedy called Lover Come Back from 1961. Day sings 2 songs in the movie, but it's also not a musical. The movie also has appearances from actors we've seen in movies and TV. For example, Ann B. Davis and Donna Douglas from television appear. Davis played Alice from The Brady Bunch, and Douglas played Ellie Mae from Beverly Hillbillies. Jack Albertson also appears, who played Grandpa Joe in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Those are my recommendations for you guys. The Man Who Knew Too Much, Cobra Woman, Pillow Talk, and Lover Come Back. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, no, thank you for sending that in. I have a letter, comment, or wait a minute. This comes from JJ Waspinator, our man Waspinator's Mystery Box. He just sends in a link. That's all he's doing. It's got mature themes and dialogue. I'm just going to put this in the chat. Here's the Waspinator's video link that he sends. And I take no responsibility for this, but anything that says this video contains mature themes and graphic dialogue for mature viewers only, I will watch. So thanks for that, King Waspinator. There you go. This is a letter from Justin Meeks, who writes in and says, "Your assumption about video discs from my previous letter was correct, sir. Sorry about the confusion. Thanks for answering. And I just want to say that your interviews so far have been great. The diversity of your guests has shown a great range across the different genres in which this community connects. I always enjoy hearing about how an individual got from here to there, and keep up the good work." Well, Justin, I very much appreciate that. You know, while I didn't expect to have a resounding response from the interviews, I was really proud of the interviews that I did do on the channel, and I hope people discover them. I really want to do more interviews with people, and feedback and shares and comments on the interviews are always helpful when you try and convince other people to come in. And for those who've asked, I am going to drop the Bill Sienkiewicz interview soon. I've just been having a problem. It's mostly a frame rate issue, and it's a pain in the ass between my camera and Bill's. So, but I'm glad that I was able to make a proper assumption about video discs. So thanks for that. And Omar94 goes on to say, Rob, as a comic reader, what lesser-known comics are you a fan of? I haven't completed all the stories, but I've liked what I read so far from both Kurt Busiek's Astro City and Alan Moore's Supreme Run. Both of those are great comics. Astro City is great. I like Astro City as it's very different from traditional superhero comics, as it's more anthology-esque and tells stories from the perspectives of characters other than superheroes, like civilians and villains. I like Supreme as it's Alan Moore going in the opposite direction from his earlier darker work like Watchmen, Swamp Thing, V for Vendetta, and Killing Joke, as he is writing a very lighthearted Superman-type character. He picked up the series after Rob Liefeld wrote and created the series and decided to go in a completely fresh and new direction, as he disliked what Liefeld was doing with the comic. Thanks, and live long and prosper. You know, I've got so many comics that I really, really like. I mean, a lot of them are up here. Like this one. This is a really great comic. I really like this. It's by Brian Wood and called Local. And if you've never read this, this collection actually is really great. It's black and white, but I really like this a lot. And I guess coming from Seattle, I kind of dug this comic a lot. So this is an interesting one. I've never really heard anybody, art's by Ryan Kelly. I've never heard anybody talk about Local. And it was one of those rando things I just picked up. It was a great looking hardcover. I like the art, and I'm like, oh, I'll buy this. So that's a comic not a lot of people talk about. And you should check it out. Dean Mikatich has written in and says, "Hi, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. Recently, I've been on a submarine movie binge. I've been watching U-571, not historically correct, but a good film. Crimson Tide, The Widowmaker, Das Boot. It was the English dub version. I can't always keep up with the subtitles, and I get pulled out of the film having to rewind and reread the subtitles. And, of course, one of your favorite films, The Hunt for Red October. These are all great films with great realism and tension that lead to great climaxes. Crimson Tide even one step further to add the realism by having the sets built onto a gimbal. I also love the chemistry between Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington with their characters butting heads. It's just excellent. Last night I sat down and watched Hunter Killer. I was expecting another rip-roaring thriller, but instead of getting one lone sub going against the majority of the Russian Northern Fleet to save the Russian president from a coup, which is the impression the trailers gave, it was just another popcorn flick with the majority of the action happening off the boat. That's not to say it was a bad film, it's just not what I was expecting. So Rob, with the exception of Red October, what other submarine films do you like? Tonight I'll be watching Kursk's Last Mission, which is available on Netflix Europe. While it's not a thriller like the movie I have already watched, it's based on real events of the disaster in 2000, so it'll be interesting to learn about the story from another source other than the British media of the time. Anyway, Rob, run silent, run deep. Dean Mikitich. Well, Dean, there's actually a submarine movie I loved called Grey Lady Down, which is basically a remake of Airport 77, which I really liked. And then, of course, there's the David Twohy movie. Hang on, why am I drawing a blank on it? About a haunted submarine that I thought was great. And why for whatever reason, why am I not getting this? Hang on. Let me find it for you. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on this. I'm telling you, it's a movie I really like. And for whatever reason, sometimes the movies just won't come. It's called Below. It's called Below. Below is you just got to watch Below. I was really impressed with Below. I thought it was really, really good. Check that out if you want to see a good one. So yeah, definitely something to watch. Here's a letter from Ian Samuels that, you know what, I always forget. I was like, I haven't been reading these letters from Ian because I always forget to download the artwork he sent along with it. But I'm going to do it now. I'm going to do this live as I'm doing this, and I'll read his letter, and I will add these pieces of artwork to the live chat because then I can read his letter, and he won't be wondering, why haven't you read my letter? So let me do that. Hold, because these are actually pretty cool things to show. So I'm going to hang on, and I will get the other one as well, because this is a very very cool imagination sort of thing to show. And let me okay, that's good. I'm good there, and let me put this one. So I'm going to put this piece of artwork up first before I read Ian Samuel's letter. Here this is. I bet you're wondering what that is. Well, you're about to find out. Rob and fellow Robservationists, this is a letter I had sent previously to you. You said you wanted to read, but it must have got lost under the deluge of other letters, so here it is again. As long as I can remember, I've been a Batman fan, from watching the Adam West Batman from the 60s before starting to read the comics, before we eventually got the 89 Batman. But I have a different collection of figures and Batman models. I have numerous 9-inch figures, a number of different Batman, Harley Quinn, and Joker from the animated series, Scarecrow from Arkham Knight, the video game, amongst others. I have a collection of Eagle Moss Batmobiles from Batman 66, the classic Batmobile, the Bat Bike with Robin in the sidecar, the Bat Boat, the Batcopter, the Batmobile and Batwing from the 89 Batman, Batmobiles from the animated series, and a video games and films. Not the Tumbler, which in my opinion is stupid. Come on, man. As it's supposed to be a per Batmobile vehicle, why the hell would he go from a tank to a car? A few Christmases ago, my wife got me a copy of the Empire Strikes Back script. This got me thinking, as a Batman fan, I would look into getting copies of the Batman movie scripts. This started simply with the script from the 66 Batman and the 89 Batman, but then I began to discover some oddities. A script for a Batman movie that was penned by Adam West, which had a retired Bruce Wayne and his girlfriend sunning themselves on a Caribbean beach after Batman had succeeded in eradicating crime in Gotham. All of the worst criminals, either in a penitentiary, or an insane asylum. But a new mega criminal appears on the scene who plans to release all of Gotham's worst criminals to work as her minions. I have a copy of the Sam Hamm script, was the basis for what became Batman 89, and his script, which was adapted into Batman Returns. I also have a copy of the Batman script from 1984 by Tom Mankiewicz, known for the screenplays for the Bond movies Diamonds Are Forever and Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun. He also wrote the screenplays from both Superman and Superman 2, but only received a credit as creative consultant for both films. Other works of his include The Cassandra Crossing, The Eagle Has Landed, and Lady Hawk. Some of the elements of his Batman screenplay ended up in an 89 Batman, seeing Bruce's parents killed and the Joker, but he had Bruce being a judge of a Miss Gotham beauty contest where he ended up betting the winner, with a conversation the following morning, including the girl insisting that because of what happened during the night, that she wouldn't be able to walk today. Well, that's what you get. With his love interest, Silver, who worked for the DA, Bruce would go see the Flying Graysons in the circus, where the Joker would arrange for the death of Dick's parents and have a fake Batman appear and take responsibility. I have seen some of the third Tim Burton Batman script, which would have had Batman take on the Riddler. Rene Russo, probably best known as Frigga in the Thor films, well, also Lethal Weapon films, and Avengers Endgame was to play Bruce Wayne's love interest. We would have also got Robin, but played by Marlon Wayans. Fortunately, this did not happen. When Warner Brothers first dropped Tim Burton and brought in Joel Schumacher, Schumacher was still intrigued in continuing with the Dark Batman. And before Warner Brothers stopped him, he had H.R. Giger design a Batmobile, which ended up, unsurprisingly, looking like an angry vagina on wheels. I have a copy of a sketch of this Batmobile. And this is what we are looking at. This is the H.R. Giger Batmobile. Here is Giger himself and more of his Batmobile. And this was a sketch that he did. It looks pretty goofy from this, but down here in the corner, that looks pretty dope. Like, I don't know if that would have been a great Batmobile to turn into a vehicle, but hey, here you go, and you can see here some of these other scribblings. Pretty neat, actually. Finally, I have a copy of Batman Triumphant by Mark Prasevich, which would have been the final part of Schumacher's trilogy. This would have had Batman and Robin take on the Scarecrow, who rumors said could have been played by, among others, Nicolas Cage or Ewan McGregor. It would have also had Madonna play Harley Quinn, daughter of Joker, seeking revenge for Batman having killed her father. It would have also had Jack Nicholson return as the Joker in nightmare sequences induced by Scarecrow's toxin. Just a taste of my collection, hopefully interesting, intriguing, and entertaining. Well, this Batmobile is pretty damn crazy, I have to say. It's interesting. I've seen that before, but I want to thank you for sending those in. And sorry it took me a long time to get to this letter. I just kept forgetting to download this. But now, hey, I've done it live. Let's see. Talini Talini, what a cool name. Asks if let me put that on screen so you guys can see it. I'm massacring this name and I'm not saying it correctly. But Talini Tanaloo? Have you watched the Lock and Key show on Netflix? I did watch the Lock and Key show. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I thought it was good, but I will watch the second season. I liked it. I didn't think it was as good as the comics and stuff, but I did like it. I did like it. Yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch the next one. As everyone knows, the Umbrella Academy, that little fun sheltering at home thing dropped. I can't wait to see that. Candiana Jones comes back with another tip and says, I didn't mean to sound like I was calling you a hater, Rob. Maybe I am. I just feel like I ordered the surf and turf and got a soggy bowl of off-brand Cheerios with curdled milk with regards to Picard. Oh, no. I don't think you were calling me a hater. Let me be very clear. Other people have called me haters. People call me a hater all the time because I don't like modern Star Trek. No, I thought Picard, even within the framework of what the story they were telling, just didn't do a very good job telling their story. I mean, what I really think is wrong with modern Star Trek is they do these things like, okay, Aldous, whatever his name is, Sung, and Bruce Maddox had Club Med for synths. And when we get there, we don't know anything about it. Like, they show us this, like, Malibu colony, and we're just supposed to assume I don't know what. How did that fit in with the rest of the plot? Bruce Maddox had borrowed money from a crime boss. To do what? you don't. These things go along, and you're just. I don't like the storytelling. Like, you never understand anything about the milieu. They completely breeze by everything. I don't know anything about the artifact. I don't know anything about the Romulan Star Empire. I'm watching refugee colonies, yet the Zat Vash has hundreds of Romulan ships. Why are there Romulan refugees when clearly the Zat Vash has places to go, things to do, and they command? And none of it makes any sense. I'm watching this, and as an astute viewer, I'm asking myself, well, wait a minute. You're trying to have it both ways. On one hand, there's Romulan refugees, but on the other hand, there's giant Romulan fleets coming after these things. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. And I that's what I don't like, is I feel like I never know where I'm at. They don't play fair with their audience. It's all made up as they go along, and the stories just aren't good. So yeah, it's a bummer. But I'm not a hater. I'm a hater of bad stories, bad storytelling and stories told badly. That's what I don't like. Sean Wolf sends in a tip and says, musicals. In recent years, I was gutted by the scene in Mad Men where Don Draper has a vision of Bert Cooper singing "The best things in life are free." Got me to check Morse out in 67's How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Amazing. Yes, he's amazing. Robert Morse was amazing, is amazing. Did he pass? I hope he didn't. Did he pass away? He's great. He was so great in that show, too. I mean, there's so many great musicals out there to find. There really is. Do yourself a favor. Check one out. Bob Koal sends in a tip and says, I posted a birthday greeting image on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page Friday, but in case you missed it, happy belated birthday. Did you ever finish your alphabetical movie videos? I didn't. I got to F, and then I stopped. People keep asking me, I should start over. But I'm moving my physical media collection here into the Robservations, so they'd be easy to do. So I think I could do that if I wanted to. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this brings an end to Robservations episode 420, and I managed to do it without getting stoned. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to be on the John Campea show in an hour. He's doing a show in an hour at 2 o'clock. And tonight, whining about movies tonight at 8 p.m., where Elizabeth, for the very first time, saw Russell Mulcahy's 1986 Highlander. That's right. We are princes of the universe. Who wants to live forever? I mean, come on. One of Freddie Mercury's last great songs. Yes, we are going to talk about Highlander, which you'd never seen until last night. I want to thank, of course, my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Detective Jim Boyers, his wife Heidi. I want to thank Greg Smith, Louis Yu, Jordy Lyons, and the Richard for all the work you do for the channel. Thank you, boys, very much. You keep everybody on the up and up, including me. I want to thank all of you and everybody out there for generously supporting me and the channel and Elizabeth on Elizabeth's Whining About Movies. Thank you for that. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I can't believe I am 20% of the way to my 500th episode. I find that insanity. Time is melting away here in quarantine. I want to see everybody come back to life. I'm wondering. I mean, I'm wondering if we should start a betting pool as to whether Tenet will stay on its July 17th date. I certainly hope it does, because I really want to go to dinner and a movie. I want to go with Elizabeth and go eat some food, have some drinks. You know, even going to like chain restaurants like the Yard House, I miss. And go see a movie at the ArcLight, or go see a movie. I want to go to the ArcLight and have their bolognese and their popcorn chicken. I want to do that. Why can't I do that? Anyway, we will see soon, hopefully. But I want to thank you all for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I will be back tomorrow. I will be on the John Campea show in an hour, and we will be back with Whining About Movies tonight at 8, talking about Highlander. And I will see you all tomorrow, or later this afternoon, or tonight, whichever comes first as far as you are concerned. And Vesna, maybe I'll go get some wine. As always, though, oh, hang on. Have a better day.